Hello, Namaskar, Vanakkam. My name is Sudhir Sahasanaman and you're watching Study with Sudhir. Now we are going to start with explanation videos of Act 2 of Pygmalion by George Bernard Shaw, which is part of the ISC Class 11 Modern English syllabus. I hope you have seen the 4 videos that I have done of Pygmalion Act 1, right? So you need to know what really happened before, and as is my style, I will do a detailed word by word, line by line explanation and also talk about the major themes and the characters in this particular play. Act 1 and Act 2 are part of your Class 11 syllabus. Act 3, 4 and 5, we will do it next year in Class 12. Okay, so this particular act, that is Act 2, in contrast to Act 1, takes place indoors. It takes place at Higgins' laboratory on Wimpole Street. Higgins, as we already know in Act 1, is a professor of phonetics and he's showing Colonel Pickering around, and that's when Eliza enters, and that's what really happens in this particular act. We will do it in as many as 10 parts because I don't want any video to be too long, because with the kind of explanation I will give, you will need to take down a whole lot of notes and understand it very closely so that you are able to do it well. Okay. Now, let's get started. Next day at 11 a.m., that is, we are talking about what happened the previous night when they had met outside, right, at Covent Garden. This has now moved indoors. Higgins' laboratory in Wimpole Street. So that is the location of where the action of Act 2 takes place. It is a room on the first floor looking on the street, which means that we are told about the geography and the layout of that particular house, that it is on the first floor looking out on the street. So what you need to remember, what you need to pay attention to is that while in the initial part, we are given a lot of details about the physical features of Professor Higgins' home, but more than the physical features, they also tell us a lot about what Professor Higgins, the kind of person Professor Higgins really is, from the kind of layout of the house, the kind of things that are found in his house, right? By these things that he surrounds himself with. They reveal his character, they reveal his personality, they also reveal the kind of lifestyle he leads, and it also reveals his approach to people, and even more important, his approach to science, the science of phonetics. So please write down all these things as I speak. Don't listen to it at 1.25 or 1.5x speed, because you need to take down these notes, because all that I'm saying you can actually use in your answers in the examination, especially the 5 marks and the 10 marks question. And later on in the scene, when we see Eliza entering, which we will do in video number 2, we see how in the manner in which Higgins reacts to Eliza, that also tells a lot about his personality. So we know a little bit about him from Act 1. Act 2 is when it will completely unravel. So it is a room on the first floor looking onto the street. So it's kind of looking out, and was meant for the drawing room. Now, this is a very important line. Was meant for the drawing room. So, first of all, let's understand what kind of place is Wimpole Street. Wimpole Street is a fashionable area in London for the upmarket, the more rich society in London. Now, having a house on Wimpole Street suggests that Professor Higgins is pretty well off. He's from the upper middle class society of London. Meant for the drawing room means that instead of being a formal sitting room, essentially to entertain guests for social life, etc., Higgins has converted it into a laboratory, because we first are told about the laboratory. So what was meant to be a drawing room, he has converted it into a laboratory, right? It shows that he values science. It shows that he values phonetics. It shows that he does not value social conventions of, greeting people, welcoming people, hosting people as much. So what it essentially shows is that he's a little different from others, a little eccentric, right? The double doors are in the middle of the back hall, and persons entering find in the corner to their right 2 tall file cabinets as in cupboards, at right angles to one another against the wall. So what George Bernard Shaw is giving you very, very precise. You can almost imagine the layout of the room, the layout of the furniture inside the room, right? So that's how precise Shaw is being here. In this corner stands a flat writing table. Now, he could have just written writing table, but he adds an adjective to it by saying flat writing table. While it shows George Bernard Shaw's attention to detail, it also tells us a little bit about Professor Higgins, that he prefers a flat writing table, not a table like this, where you can write like, at an angle. So it is giving us very, very precise. Basically, Bernard Shaw wants us to know Higgins very well, right? That's also the intention. That's also the intention. Then on this flat writing table are different kinds of scientific instruments. There is a phonograph, there is a laryngoscope, there is a row of tiny organ pipes with a bellows, a set of lamp chimneys for singing flames with burners attached to a gas plug in the wall by an India rubber tube, several tunic forks. Tunic forks, I don't know if you are familiar with it. You would be when you do experiments in the physics lab, tang, and you hear the sound, right? So tunic forks of different sizes, a life-size image of half a human head showing in section the vocal organs. Let me go through it one by one. Now, these are all different scientific instruments for studying sound, for studying speech, for studying phonetics. Okay, that's what it. Each one, let's understand. Phonograph was an early recording device. Okay, this was an early recording device. What is a laryngoscope? Laryngoscope is an instrument to examine the throat or the vocal cords, right? So this is that. A row of tiny organ pipes, again something which kind of produces a kind of a sound, an amplified sound, right? A set of lamp chimneys for singing flames. Singing flames is an experiment to visualize the sound waves. The sound waves when you are able to visualize. The tuning fork, as I said, is to produce, fixed notes, fixed musical notes. It is used to study sounds in a very precise manner, right? Use it in physics laboratories, etc. Then a half human head model is again used to show speech organs. The wax cylinders are early storage system for recorded voices. So these are all, we're talking about something from a different era, but for that time he had very advanced kind of sound instruments. So basically all these different kind of scientific instruments, what do they show is that Higgins treats language as a science, not as an art, because it is a laboratory. It is not a music composer's studio, right? If many of instruments like these, you would find in a music composer. Let's say you get an opportunity to go into a music composer like, let's say, A.R. Rahman or Devi Sri Prasad. I've been inside Devi Sri Prasad or Harris Jayaraj's studio, right? They have these huge systems. I've been to both Harris Jayaraj and Devi Sri Prasad studios. So you find this kind of, huge studios with huge instruments. But there, it is a process of creating music. It is an artistic process. But what Professor Higgins is doing is to treat the vocal cords, more as a science and not as an art. He seems to be obsessed with surrounding himself with equipment instead of, even that we saw even in Act 1, and we'll see this even more in Act 2, that there is lack of human warmth. Whereas when an A.R. Rahman or a Harris Jayaraj will produce music, there will be a sense of emotion. There will be a sense of love, affection, different kinds of sounds conveying different kinds of, music is essentially bhakti, right? So it conveying different forms of emotions, right? So a drawing room, which could have been a space where you would do human to human interaction, which would convey friendship, it would convey relationships, but now it is filled up with machines, sound machines of different kinds. Is this clear, right? I've tried to explain it in as detail as possible. Now, further down the room, on the same side is a fireplace. Now, this is the main part. But there is further down, it's slightly different because there is a fireplace. Fireplace does convey a bit of warmth. Let's concede that, right? With a comfortable leather covered easy chair, right? So this conveys comfort. This word conveys comfort, and it is an easy chair, where you can lean back at the side of the hearth nearest the door, right? Hearth is again associated with the fireplace, and a coal scuttle again associated with the fireplace. There is a clock on the mantelpiece. Between the fireplace and the phonograph table is a stand for newspapers. Again, Shaw giving us a lot of detail. So the mention of the fireplace, the easy chair, which is comfortable, it adds a slightly domestic and homely touch to this entire description, to the living room. So what it also, however, means is that Professor Higgins does not distinguish between his home and his laboratory. All of them are part of the same kind of a four walls, right? They kind of coexist. His laboratory coexists with his home. So that is an extremely important aspect. So please note it down. So means to say that he lives, it's his living room. His living room resides within his laboratory or coexists with his laboratory. Is this clear? On the other side of the central door, to the left of the visitor, is a cabinet of shallow drawers, right? On it is the telephone. Now, telephone in those days would convey a sense of modernity, okay, because not everyone could afford to own a telephone, and the telephone directory. The corner beyond and most of the side wall is occupied by a grand piano, which conveys a sense of richness, because piano is not something which the not very well off could afford to own, with the keyboard at the end furthest from the door. So you see how much of detail George Bernard Shaw is giving, and a bench for the player extending the full length of the keyboard. On the piano is a dessert dish heaped with fruit and sweets, mostly chocolate. So there are two details which I want you to take note of. One, the piano conveys both wealth. It also conveys modernity. Okay, it also conveys modernity. It also conveys a sense of fondness for art. Okay, in this case, just the piano, not the earlier scientifics, which is why everything is coexisting. So you find Professor Higgins to be a man of several parts. His scientific instruments, wherein he's kind of using for sound, it conveys that he's interested in the sound. Piano is also something which kind of creates sound. So you see, of all the things, he's having a musical instrument which will also release a kind of a sound, right? But what is more important is that on top of that, there is a dessert dish which contains chocolates, and that kind of indicates that Higgins has some kind of a childlike quality as a person who likes chocolates, right? So he's a grown-up man, an elderly person, but he's brilliant. He's a scientist. He's a professor. But all the same time, he also indulges in these kind of fondness for sweets. The fourth paragraph, the middle of the room is clear. Besides the easy chair, the piano bench, and the two chairs, and the phonograph table, there is one stray chair. It stands near the fireplace. On the walls, engravings, mostly Piranesi and mezzotint portraits, no paintings. Now, a little bit of detail here. First of all, makes it very clear that there are no paintings. Okay, only engravings. Now, this particular gentleman, Piranesi, okay, his name is Piranesi. The full name is Giovanni Piranesi. Okay, he was an Italian artist, and he was famous for his engravings, right? Which were like detailed black and white prints of Roman ruins, etc., buildings, etc. And his works were known to be extremely precise, very much like Professor Higgins, very technical, very much like Professor Higgins, but did not have any color or emotion, again, very much like Professor Higgins. So you realize that even the engravings that he has on the walls reflect his personality, right? So Higgins has Piranesi's engravings, not paintings. This shows that he values structure and form and not any kind of emotion in the form of paintings, because painting will be a sense of emotion, a reflection of the mood, the thoughts, the ideas, etc. Right? So it reflects Higgins' very scientific and rational mind. The second is mezzotint paintings. Now, mezzotint portraits is essentially a print making technique, a way of making pictures by engraving on a metal plate and then printing it. So these are all techniques which were used in London at that point in time, and they were pretty popular in the 18th and the 19th century before photography became much more common. So it produced black and white images which are slightly soft in shades, often portraits of famous people. So basically, why is it mentioned here? It is mentioned here to say that Higgins prefers engravings and not and prints and not paintings. Mezzotints were known to be very accurate, right? So is the case with Piranesi. So both of them convey a sense of Higgins' kind of personality, that he preferred the technical finesse in that sense. Precision, form is what he preferred. Now Pickering. Now we are introduced to the second person who we met in Act 1, which is Colonel Pickering. Now Pickering is seated at the table, putting down some cards and a tuning fork which he has been using. Now we know that he's also interested in the entire science of phonetics. So what is important is that Pickering is much more of a gentleman, much more of a polite nature, and a complete contrast to Professor Higgins, who is described now. Higgins is standing up near him, closing 2 or 3 file drawers which are hanging out. So he wants it to be precise. No drawer can be left open. They have to be kind of closing, which are not left even open, half open. He appears in the morning light as a robust, vital, appetizing sort of man. I want you to please make note of all these words which have been used by Shaw for Professor Higgins, because he's your protagonist along with Eliza, right? So if you get a character analysis, you should quote from the text and make sure to use all these kind of words that Shaw has used for Higgins. Of 40 or thereabout. So he's in the early 40s, right? He's dressed in a professional looking black frock coat with a white linen collar and a black silk tie. So this part is important for you to remember so that you can quote it in your answers. He's of the energetic scientific type. So that shows his personality. We have been told about how he's dressed, and now we are being told that he's robust, vital, energetic, scientific type, heartily, even violently interested in everything that can be studied as a scientific subject, and careless about himself and other people. So all these things you need to remember, that he's careless, he's obsessed with anything which can qualify to be a scientific subject. He's in fact careless about himself and other people, including their feelings. Now this is an important aspect that Bernard Shaw is telling us upfront, so that we understand from the manner he speaks to Eliza that, oh, Shaw had already told us about it. He's in fact, but for his years and size, rather like a very impetuous baby taking notice. So he's basically, all this is preparing us for how he will react when Eliza enters the house, right? So impetuous is something, very temperamental, right? Temperamental, taking notice eagerly. He would kind of make note of anything that he's interested in, right? And loudly, and requiring almost as much watching to keep him out of unintended mischief, right? So you would need to keep an eye, because he's very energetic when he comes across something which would interest his area of, his subject of interest. His manner varies from general bullying, another genial bullying, not general, genial bullying. Genial means friendly, but at the same time bullying. So this is almost like an oxymoron, right? It's like a paradox, right? You are being told about two different things. Because if you are a bully, it's highly unlikely that you will be genial, right? And as we see, he's not really a very genial kind of a person. When he's in a good humor, to stormy petulance. Petulance means very irritated and angry. And then he can be like a storm. So he can be a bully, slightly genial, but he can also be a stormy, petulant kind who gets very angry, temperamental sort when something goes wrong. So he can swing to extremes is what you should write in your answers, and use these two keywords. But he is so entirely frank and void of malice, but he does not have any malice. He's not an evil type. This is his personality. I think I know someone like him. In my city, I think I know someone like him. He's void of malice, though that fellow is also very malicious. That he remains likable even in his most reasonable moments. So, what Shaw is saying is trying to make us like Higgins. It's quite difficult to like Higgins because his bullying temperament really comes to the fore. So, but what Shaw is saying is that he remains likable even when we think he cannot be liked, he can actually be liked. So this is something which Bernard Shaw is telling us about Professor Higgins. Now let's get started with the dialogue part. Okay, so before I start, what do we learn from the first 2 pages of Act 2? One, about the drawing room, the setting of the drawing room, that he prioritizes knowledge over any kind of social niceties. Then his obsession that he's surrounded himself with instruments. He's very practical. The kind of engravings that he has put, they also point to his very precise kind of thinking. Then he's also like a child. He's curious but emotional. I mean, he's not someone vested in too much of emotions. And all this description prepares us for how we look at Higgins later, especially his interaction with Eliza. So what we need to remember is that we should not read this only as stage directions. This is Bernard Shaw preparing the reader for how we should actually look at Higgins, right? That he's not just a professor, he's a mix of a genius. He also has some childlike qualities, which is very obvious from the sweets, the chocolates that he has kept on top of the piano. Is this clear? Let's move ahead. Higgins says, as he shuts the last drawer, well, I think that's the whole show, right? So he says that, he closes the last drawer, and whole show means he has shown everything that he had to demonstrate or show to Colonel Pickering, which means that he treats his scientific work, whole show, the word shows that he treats his scientific work almost like a performance. You say, oh, the show got over. The show is, the magic show got over means it's a performance. So he's almost, when he's showcasing his entire instruments, etc., it almost like is like a performance, or let's say an exhibition for Professor Higgins, and there is a lot of pride and energy that he takes in it with a lot of energy. It's really amazing. I haven't taken half of it in. So Pickering is a much more of a self-critical kind of person, and he seems to be very overwhelmed at what he has seen at Professor Higgins' laboratory. So he's saying that, I have not even probably understood or processed what all you have shown. So it shows that he's very impressed. And through Pickering's reaction, basically Bernard Shaw is trying to show the complexity of what Professor Higgins' laboratory is really about. His entire research on phonetics. It is beyond the grasp of an intelligent man like Pickering. Pickering is almost like, very humble and, self-critical, "Arey, mujhe to kuch samajh mein nahi aaya" kind of a line he's making. And that makes Higgins seem even more extraordinary. Pickering rising, would you like to go over it, any of it again? So Higgins is quite eager and excited and willing to explain something again in case Colonel Pickering had not understood any bit of it. So it's almost like a child with a new toy. He never tires of his subject, and he assumes that someone else will also share his excitement and curiosity. Pickering rises and he comes to the fireplace where he plants himself with his back to the fire so that he can, it doesn't feel cold. "No, thank you, not now. I'm quite done up for this morning. That I have seen quite a lot." So done up means I'm quite exhausted, from all the stuff that I have seen so far. So Pickering moves to the fireplace. It suggests that he needs warmth. It suggests that he needs a moment of rest. It also means that while scientific study may be quite fascinating even for Pickering, it's also very draining. It's also very tiresome, right? So Pickering represents, our kind of normal human response, that while we are curious, but our curiosity also has certain limits. Higgins says, tired of listening to sounds. So he's kind of wanting to know. So it's almost like in a very teasing kind of a tone. That listening to sounds is natural and exciting for him, not tiring. So he's saying, you are tired of something like this. There are some people, no, who will go for trekking and some will karke karenge. Are, tum itna jaldi tired ho gaye, no? That kind of a taunt they'll say. So this also seems like a teasing, taunt kind of thing. Oh, tired of listening to sounds. Can anyone get tired of listening to sounds is probably what he means, which shows that he has a lot of energy for his passion. Pickering quite doesn't have. Pickering, yes, and it is a fearful strain, right? So he says it's a fearful strain. I rather fancied myself. So he's saying that, fearful strain is because of what he has heard so far at that laboratory. I rather fancied myself that I can pronounce 24 distinct vowel sounds, right? I can distinguish between 24 of them. But you have 130 different kinds of sounds, and I cannot hear a bit of difference. That all many of them sound very similar. So I am not able to do that. So basically, there is admiration in his tone that I can't do that, but you're so good. I am at 24, you are at 130, right? So you have this extraordinary gift in phonetics, which I don't have, even though I call myself some kind of an expert. Higgins chuckling. Higgins obviously is very happy to hear that bit of a praise. And he goes to the piano to eat sweets. Oh, that comes with practice. You hear no difference at first, but you keep on listening, and presently you will find they're as different from A and B. So he says that each one of those 131, they're all as different as A and B are, right? So it comes with practice, because initially they all sound the same. But if you keep on hearing it, you will realize that they are different. And at that point in time, Mrs. Pierce, who's some kind of a housekeeper, she looks in. She's Higgins' housekeeper. What is the matter? So she kind of this thing. So what this line shows is Higgins' genius, that he's able to kind of distinguish between different kinds of sounds, 130 different kinds of sounds. And the sweets kind of emphasize his childlike nature, who likes to indulge himself, right? So Mrs. Pierce, who is the housekeeper, comes. Mrs. Pierce, she's hesitating, which shows that she's a little scared of Professor Higgins' temperament, evidently perplexed. A young woman wants to see you, sir. So she's a little surprised that a young woman has come to see Professor Higgins, which shows that he probably did not get those kind of visitors. A young woman, what does she want? Mrs. Pierce, well, sir, she said you'll be glad to see her. You'll be glad to see her when you know what she has come about. She's quite a common girl, sir, right? So she's quite a common girl is what he's saying, that, she doesn't kind of belong to this kind of society. Very common indeed. I should have sent her away. Only I thought perhaps you wanted her to talk into your machines, that you wanted to use her voice for your machines. So that's the reason why I've asked her to wait while I come here and inform you about her visit. I hope I have not done anything wrong. So this again, it shows a sense of, she's fearful of Professor Higgins' personality. But really, you see such queer people around. Queer means strange people sometimes. You will excuse me, I am sure, sir. So she's being very, very, tentative about it. She does not know how Higgins is likely to react. So which is why she's going on kind of, saying that I hope you will excuse me. I hope I have not done anything wrong. Those kind of sentences, which tell us about Mrs. Pierce's personality as well, especially her relationship, her equation with her master. Higgins says, oh, that's all right. So before this, when Higgins says, a young woman, what does she want? It shows that, he's very blunt. He's not concerned with social etiquette or priority. And he's very direct in his kind of approach. Very common when Mrs. Pierce says, she's very common indeed. It also shows us the class distinction that is being made. It shows the prejudice of the society of that time, the Edwardian society, that common people were not expected to be seen at places like Wimpole Street, right? That this is a place where only the upper rich class people stay. Common people were not expected. So when she comes, it is greeted by a lot of surprise by Mrs. Pierce. Oh, that's all right, Mrs. Pierce. Has she an interesting accent? Now you see, that's all he's interested in. It doesn't matter that she's a common person, but he's only bothered about the manner of her speech. So to Higgins, and please note this down, to Professor Higgins, people are only objects of study. He values her accent, not her as a human being. Her sound is the only thing. Her diction, her sound are the only thing that he is interested in. Oh, something dreadful, sir, really. I don't know how you can take an interest in it. So she's not happy with it. So she says Eliza's speech is ugly, dreadful, it's vulgar, right? And anyone who uses bad language, it is shameful for like Mrs. Pierce. But for Higgins, it is exciting material. It is material for his phonetic machine. So therefore, he would get excited. And she says, I don't know how you can take an interest in it. So Higgins says to Pickering, let's have her up, show her up, Mrs. Pierce. He rushes across to his working table and picks out a cylinder to use on the phonograph. So he says, let her come up, and he immediately rushes to get his phonograph cylinder ready. So basically, he wants to use Eliza as a specimen for recording purposes. Mrs. Pierce only half resigned to it. So she's not very happy about this development. And she says, half resigned. Okay, kind of a thing. Very well, sir. It is for you to say, it's for you to decide. And she goes downstairs. Higgins says, this is rather a bit of luck. I will show you how I make records. We will set her talking, and I will take it down first in Bell's visible speech, then in broad Romic. So now he's sharing his plan with Pickering. So he says that these are the different instruments I will use. I will take it first in Bell's visible speech. Now, Bell's visible speech was a phonetic instrument or an alphabet to record sounds. Okay, it was a phonetic instrument to record sounds. Then in broad Romic, it was another phonetic transcription system. Okay, and then we will get her on the phonograph to capture her actual voice, and so that you can turn her on as often as you like with the written transcript before you, so that we can match it with the written transcript. You can hear her voice. We can also know what she has actually said. So basically, what it reveals is his Professor Higgins very methodical and very scientific approach. Is very clear which are the different instruments he would like to use in order to record and examine Eliza's voice in detail. So what it essentially means that Eliza will now become nothing but an experiment for Professor Higgins. So that's what it finally comes down to. So then Mrs. Pierce returns and she says, this is the young woman, sir. So now she's formally introduced to Professor Higgins' world. So now the stage is set for the central conflict of the play between Eliza and Professor Higgins, who wants to transform her speech. Even she wants to, but that's what is the central conflict. It leads to conflict. So basically, Mrs. Pierce is shocked by Eliza's presence there, that she's not meant to be seen at that place in Wimpole Street. It kind of shows the very rigid class divisions which were there in London society at that time. Higgins is not bothered about the class divisions because he's more interested in Eliza as a subject of study. He sees her as an opportunity to study her phonetic sounds, and it kind of all this sets up, as I said, the central conflict of the play. What will really happen between Eliza and Professor Higgins, whether he's able to transform her, and if he is, what really happens as a result. So what we are going to do is to pause the first explanation video out here. I will see you in the second explanation video, where we will get introduced to Eliza for the second time, of course, but we will come to know as to what is the reason she has arrived at Professor Higgins' laboratory. Okay, I'll see you in the next video. Tata, bye bye. Share the videos with your batchmates and friends and with your juniors next year, and subscribe to the channel. Tata, bye bye. Namaskar.